Good. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting for February 19th, 2024 of Oregon City Council. If you would join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no requirement for council members to be at Committee of the Whole meetings. However, let the record show that all council members are present here this evening. Also joining us this evening is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Mazer, Clerk of Council Cassie Rawson, Law Director Melissa Purpura, Public Service Director Paul Roman, okay, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Assistant Chief Mark Mullins, Finance Director Nick Roman. The first item that we'll have for this evening is persons and delegations. Typically, in Committee of the Whole, we may or may not always have those. This evening, we do have a person signed in to speak. So at this time, I would call forward Marianne Ramsey. And ma'am, we'll have you state your name and your address for the record when you get to the microphone.
Marianne Ramsey, 4744 Navarre, number 83.
Right ahead.
My concern is the parking lot on Navarre. I'm sure you're all aware of what I'm talking about. Mexico Lindo's parking lot. It's like a minefield. It's been like that for years and nothing seems to be getting done about it. To me, it's a mark on the city. You have people coming in and they see that. You're going to be building a town center. Do you want your town center to be a representation of what you see down the road? And in time, who says it won't get like that? You are all here from Oregon. I'm sure you know what a mess it is, and it's not necessary. Speed bumps in there are a joke, and they keep putting patch onto patch onto patch onto patch. I sent something out in Facebook to the community, and I've had 65 people respond saying they would hope that something could be done about it. So that's where I'm at. I'm sure it lowers the property values in the city. It's not good for visitors coming through. That's pretty much all I have to say. It's been like that for years. I've been here 16 years. I have children and grandchildren who say it was like that when they lived here. And I don't want us to look like Toledo. Come on. Okay? That's pretty much all I have to say. I would like to hear something. I talked to Mr. Salander, and I hope to hear something from you, that there's something that you can do. If it was remarked in some of the responses I got, that if you can do something with the people who have tall grass, then you should be able to do something with this parking lot, even if it is a business. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Ramsey, and we do appreciate your comments. That particular property in the parking area has been a topic of discussion on several different occasions. Do we have anything from the administration that you want to address or respond to?
Yes.
Mr. Mazer?
Yes, Mr.
Please.
President. Thank you. Thank you, Council. And thank you for coming up and speaking your concerns. We did a little search in the history. I talked with Steve Strake about it today, and this property has had violations in the past, and according to our city code right now, it reads that, you know, they have to put in a patch for a pothole. And when you drive through the parking lot, you can see, and I've driven through this parking lot before, and I've inquired myself about it because I too have received complaints, and am sure that everybody around this table has received complaints about it. So it is in compliance, and I don't know if Mr. Roman can help me out with some of the engineering terminology, but you know, when you park your car in the parking stall, over time, where the wheels sit, and that's from, you know, stopping on that location, will start to put divots into the parking lot. But the asphalt is still intact, and if they're repairing the potholes, that is still meets compliance with our code. So right now, what we're doing is we're looking at different codes, and if we wanted to address it, we'd have to address something in the code, have it passed here, and then enforce it. As of right now, we are looking into the nuisance aspect of it, to see if there's anything we can do, but I know that in the past, I believe it was 2019 and 2020, this actually went to court, and the case was dismissed both times. So we are looking at reapproaching that route, and also looking into our code to see if there's anything that, we can beef up. The only, call it a consequence of this, or maybe even an unintended consequences, then you have to start enforcing on all of the parking lots like that in the same fashion. So you can't pick and choose which ones, you enforce on or not. So
That one and Freeway are about the only ones that I know of. They fixed the one where Harbor Freight's at. I don't know if that was a criteria for Harbor Freight moving in, but it seemed like parking lot got fixed and then Harbor Freight moved in.
Mhm.
So.
and then there are other parking lots that do have some issues with the conditions.
I haven't seen any other ones. That one in particular. Even the space between Dollar Tree and Lucky's, they have seen fit to put nice tar there. And it had potholes in there too, so.
If they're meeting the code and they're in compliance, but again, several times this has been addressed and they have come into compliance, the bare minimum. But yeah, very bare minimum, right? So the only way to address it on our end is to go through the code.
Mr. President? Thank you, Mr.
Yes, Mr. Wallen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mazur, as we develop and consider property maintenance codes for the residential side, to address a situation like this, is you look at a property maintenance code on the commercial side. And that's how you can address this type of situation. And obviously, I would hope that we look into that at the same time as the residential property maintenance code, to parallel that with the commercial property maintenance code.
You got it. We are looking-
Very good. Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Wallen.
President,
I'm sorry, who was that? Mr. Reeves?
yes, thank
Mr.
you.
Reeves, please.
I know, and I know you know as well, Mr. President, that we have had a couple of meetings already, and we've been meeting with our city administrator, the building and zoning director, our public service director, and we are anticipating by the middle of April of coming up with some kind of a property maintenance code for not only private, residential and commercial, that we are going to have a public we'd like to have a public meeting and have people come in and discuss what, the findings that we are trying, or the ordinances that we are trying to improve upon to make our city look well. So with that all being said, there will be a public hearing sometime when we bring this in mid-April. That was sort of a deadline that we had given the administration to come up with something that we can all live with and agree upon, with the noxious weeds and all the other things, making sure that we got it how we would like it. So we have been working on it. We all feel the same way. I just don't, I don't do business over there if they're not gonna fix things up. So I wholeheartedly agree, but to let you know, we are working on it. And we should have something hopefully by mid-April or the end of April that we can bring to the council floor, that people can come in and have a public hearing and speak about it.
Things like that just keep getting worse and worse. This guy goes, oh, well, they can get away with it. Why should I do mine?
We don't want a Band-Aid on it. So that's what I tell you, we've had a couple of meetings already, and we have another one scheduled as soon as we can get the, everything together. I know our administration is working really hard on it. I know Mr. Shrake is very, busy right now, but he's still working on it and he has people in his department. So we gave them the middle of April to come up with something.
When I say I live more than people look at you like that's a good thing. You know, they're moving out of Toledo and they're coming in over here because we keep it nice. And I think that matters. And that's your dollar too.
Well, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and that's why we're going with this, because it is an eyesore. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, any others? And I would just close and say, Ms. Renzi, is to Mr. Reeves's point, we have met on a couple of occasions and started addressing that with what we call a property maintenance code, which sets maybe a little higher standard than what we have today and gives us some opportunities to, have those discussions and have a tool to be able to utilize to make those improvements, because we agree as you do. We would like everything in our city to be up to a certain standard, and that's one of the areas that we are going to be addressing through that. So thank you for coming forward this evening.
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor.
I just want to add one thing. As city administrator had mentioned earlier, that a couple times they were cited in Oregon Municipal Court and the case was dismissed. It was dismissed because they were given so much time to make improvements, which they did. But being that we can only enforce what our code states, they come up to that minimum. That's why those cases were dismissed. And so, like I said, the only thing is the upgrade of the code upgrades the parking lot.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, ma'am. We will move into our agenda items for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, we do have several through that, so if you have questions as you go. The one I would note is item 33 of 2024 is being pulled from tonight's consideration and discussion. The plan that has been received is still the draft copy, and we want to wait till the final copy is in before we go ahead and bring that to council for approval of that resolution. So that will be removed from this evening's consideration. Saying that, we'll start with item 28 of 2024, and we will go to Mr. Mazer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, council. The item number 28 is annual legislation to update the codified ordinances for Oregon. So every year we send the Walter Drain Company our ordinances and they review them. And when they do, they update our code books. So we have the replacement pages available if anybody wants to review them. This was actually a lighter year than previous years. So that expense is actually down from previous years. We only do it once a year. So this happens annually, and I'll just take any questions if anybody has them.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, any questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 28 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to move item number 29 of 2024 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
28. Item 28.
Item 28 of 2024. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reeves. We have a motion by Mr. Wallenczak, a second by Mr. Reeves. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 28 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Next item on the agenda for this evening is item 29 of 2024. And for this, we'll go to Public Service Director Paul Roman. Mr.
Thank
Roman?
you. Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into a construction contract with Shelley Company for the Corduroy Road and Wynn Road resurfacing project. The limits of this project are on Wynn Road from Cedar Point Road to Corduroy, and then on Corduroy from Wynn to Stadium. This project was included in the 2024 CIP budget, and we did receive a $500,000 grant from ODOT for this work. And out of the 4 bids received, Shelley Company was the lowest and best bid. And I believe the reason why is they're also a low bidder for Coy Road, and they're already in the area, and that's probably why they gave a favorable bid. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments on item 29? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 29 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves,
I move it to next week's regular meeting agenda.
thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second. Second by Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Drake. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 29 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Next item on the agenda is item 30 of 2024, and again, we'll go to Public Service Director Paul Roman. Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to close out the Oregon Town Center Phase 1 project with Moser Construction. This change order number 1, final, is fully described in Exhibit A. If you look at the change order, there's a lot of items, a lot of credits, a lot of claims. But the bulk of the claims is really due to poor soil conditions. And as we were constructing the road, we did receive a lot of wet weather, which doesn't help. So we had a lot of undercutting where we had to provide more stone aggregate. And we also put in what's called the geogrid. It's equal to so much depth of stone for the road base. We also had work at Dunn's. If you recall, when we already entered into the contract with Moser, we had negotiated the right-of-way for their drive. Following that, we had to add a lot of concrete work to the project after we had already awarded the construction contract to Moser. So that was a big dollar item. Overall, it's a change order of about 4% over the contract amount. I'd rather see 0, but that doesn't ever happen. But it worked out to be a very good project. So, but I'd be happy to answer questions again.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any comments or questions? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 30 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wallenczak.
thank you, Mr. President. I make a motion to move item number 30 of 2024 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Second by Mrs. Poliv. We have a motion by Mr. Wallenczak, seconded by Mrs. Poliv. Council, any objections? Hearing none, item 30 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. Next item on the agenda is item 31 of 2024, and again, we go to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into an easement agreement with Brian and Rebecca Cornell for a drainage easement along Wolf Creek. As part of the wetlands project out back, the Cornells have asked the city to continue the strength bank stabilization work along Wolf Creek, just east of our project. And we believe this is a benefit to the city. Is it extending the Wolf Creek project? The city has property on the south side, so it does match it then on the north side. It's a better transition to the original creek alignment. So it is a betterment for the project. Cornells have asked for this. They've also donating the easement for the work. So it doesn't just benefit them, it does benefit the city. And we think it's a good thing. So again, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments on item 31? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 31 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
I'd like to make a motion to move item 31, 2024 to next week's agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Second by Mr. Wallenczak. We have a motion by Mrs. Ackerman, a second by Mr. Wallenczak. Council, any objections to item 31? Hearing none, we will move item 31 of 2024 to next week's agenda. Next item on the agenda is item 32 of 2024, and again, we'll go to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to submit a loan application to the Ohio EPA to finance our water treatment plant concrete replacement project. This work is located in plant number 1 of which is called the Chemical Building, originally built in 1964. So this is a lot of original concrete work, and the basin work are really open top. They are open top basins, and they are subject to more winter freeze and thaw. This project was included in the budget. I think council, you're aware of us obtaining OPWC funding for this project as well. So that does help us on reduce the loan cost. The draft loan agreement is in Exhibit A. We are still working on it, but the bulk of the data is there. Again, happy to answer any questions on this.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments on item 32?
Mr. President.
Mr. Wollenzak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Roman, I see that we do have $450,000 grant, $450,000 0% loan from the OPWC. Do we have an idea of what the cost will be on the project? I know we talked about it in budget, I just don't remember. off the
Yeah,
top of my head.
the loan itself is 1.5, so together with 900, it's about 2.4 million.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr.
President.
Wollenzak. Council, any additional questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll seek a motion to move item 32 of 2024 to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Salander.
I'd like to make a motion to move item number 32 to next week's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Salander. Second. Second by Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Salander, seconded by Mr. Drake. Council, any objections to item 32? Hearing none, item 32 of 2024 is moved to next week's agenda. We'll skip ahead to item 34, and again, we'll go to Mr. Roman.
Mr. President, if I could I present items 34 through 42 together?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go one by one, but overall, if you're new to us providing this, we do this every year, but we used to call them the blanket contracts. They really are just issuing POs, and you're doing it by legislation. But these are companies that we have that we call from time to time. It's on an as-needed basis only. It's really to assist the Public Service Department, in particular the engineers, a lot of times for construction or inspection or soil work. Also at the water plant, wastewater plant, they may have technical issues. And there are a lot of these companies we have gone to for a lot of years. I know originally with Sullivan Diving, who does all the underwater inspections for the crib and our intake. And years past, some years it'd only be a couple thousand in one year, and then the following year you would have $20,000 worth of work. So after a while, finance department would tell us that, hey, you really need legislation. At the time, our limit back then was 15,000, and once you're over, they said you need an ordinance. So we started these annual contracts, but again, it's for technical work and it's on an as-needed basis only. So item 34 is with Demetrica Jacobs. They are electrical engineers, but they provide a lot of technical work for our what's called our SCADA systems. These are the automated supervisory control and data acquisition systems at both water plant and wastewater plant. They've done a lot of work for us for a lot of years. They don't have there's no increase in cost from last year. I just want to mention that. But again, that's what they're used for. Item 35 is Sullivan Diving. They do a lot of underwater inspections for the water treatment plant. We have used them for our large sanitary sewers. If we had a failure, sometimes the camera can only do so much. And if you need physical work done, a diver can do that work. So, item 36 with Bowser Mourner. They provide construction, material testing, inspection. They do provide engineering services, geotechnical, environmental. They also provide soil borings. Item 37 was CT Consultants. And by the way, CT and Bowser Mourner are competitors. And sometimes, a lot of times, if we're just getting soil borings, we may go to both companies and get quotes from each one, make sure that we're getting a fair cost for work. But last year, I told council that CT Consultants had partnered with TTL, and TTL was getting out of some of the business. Well, this year they've told us that TTL, they're basically splitting their construction services. So item 38 is also with TTL. Item 37 is with CT. The difference is CT Consultants will provide building material testing and soil borings. They also provide engineering services, whereas TTL under item 38 will only provide construction testing, which is, let's say, concrete or compaction, and as well as inspection work and laboratory services. So item 39 is with DGL. Typically this work or this PO work is traffic engineering support. Rodney or Brooke may come up with a study, and it's nice to have a professional traffic engineer take a look at our work. On projects such as like Navarre and Coy or really large engineering projects, anything over 25,000, you have to go and get qualification statements from any engineering firm in the area that's interested in. Engineering is a little bit different. You go through qualifications. It isn't just based on cost. And a lot of times when you pick the best firm, then you work out a cost. And if that doesn't work out, you go to the next most qualified. But there is a process. But this PO work is more for as-needed traffic study work. And Barb Jones, who works with them, if we have a timing issue on Navarre, it's very easy and it's nice to have a PO in place that you can have them take a look at the work. Item 40 is with QCI, that's quality control inspection. They provide a lot of inspection work for us in the public right of way, water lines, sewer projects. They're probably still the best price compared to any other engineering firm. They're strictly inspectors, which makes it unique. Again, a lot of other cities do the same as us. Item 41 is with West Erie Realty. West Erie in a lot of past years have done a lot of right-of-way acquisitioning. I can tell you on a lot of these projects that the engineering department has, there are times that you find yourself out of the right-of-way and you need an easement, you need something quick. Andrea was very good at getting a lot of the water line easements for our past water line project, but for anything bigger than that, I think it's good to be able to go to a firm that's on call that can help us either with an appraisal or even a negotiation, especially if there's a big number. Again, if it's an ODOT project or something much larger, we have to go through qualification statements. And again, that's different. And then Davie Resource Group, this is a new one for this work for these annual POs. But we've been using Davie Resource Group, and Dietering's their competitor for invasive species control. This is basically spraying either Phragmites or cattails or things that are causing problems. And we've been hiring them each year. And with our 3 wetland project, we now watch over 36 acres of wetlands, and we do hire them for invasive species control. One application is like 22,000. I'd like to say that's good enough for most years, but there may be a year where you need a second application. If you do that, then you're over the 25,000 limit, and therefore you need an ordinance. So we thought, you know what, let's just do an ordinance for them. You see the rates that they use are included in the exhibit, and we would use those same figures for any additional work, especially a second application to be the same unit cost. So yeah, I think that's it. I know it's a lot. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. Certainly if you review something, you have questions, let me know throughout the week. So that's it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Counselor, are there any questions or comments on any of the items from 34 to 42?
Mr. President,
Mrs. Ackerman.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Roman, for all that information, and I want to thank the city for even attempting to control purple loosestrife and Phragmites, and I noticed it, and I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackerman. Council, any other comments or questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake.
Mr. Roman, what is a Phragmite?
What is it?
What is it?
Well, if you go out to our CDF facility, it's a very tall invasive plant, and it just spreads like wildfire. And if you don't control it, the roots themselves are as deep as their height.
Yeah.
So they're extremely difficult. We've invested a lot of money in these wetlands and and unfortunately, like there's a lot of areas along Lake Erie that have Phragmites. They just take over everything, Paul. They literally destroy all other plants. So the fear is that they'll do that to these wetlands. And so the idea is to get them out of there as soon as possible. And what's good about some of this is, a lot of it is spot spraying, but if you can mechanically remove it, that's good. But Phragmites, you're not going to be able to mechanically remove. You're going to have to spray it. So
Thank you.
Some communities burn it, but that's not good either, So.
Thanks,
Very
Paul.
good.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any other comments or questions?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
just real quick, Mr. Roman, thank you for the explanation on all of those. I did have some questions, and I know we talked earlier, and I greatly appreciate all the hard work and the dedication that you do on all of these ordinance and getting these, taken care of for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, any further questions? Hearing none, council, I would propose that we would make a single motion for items 34 to 42 unless there's an objection to call them out individually. Any objection, anybody from council? Nope, so we'll seek a single motion for items 34 through 42 to move them to next week's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Wolenczak. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Wolenczak to move items 34 through 42 of 2024 to next week's agenda. Any objections? Hearing none, all the items are moved to next week's agenda. Council, that does conclude the business before us this evening on the agenda. I would like to start with the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President, but this time I have no report.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Mazer.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Roman?
Mr. President, I just want to make one note on item 33 in terms of pulling that. It was a draft form and we just weren't receiving the final draft. I know we mentioned that earlier. But we also thought we could apply for First Safe Routes to School grant, which is due March 1st. There's just not enough time to submit an application. So we thought, you know what? It isn't as much of a rush for the plan itself, and we thought we'd bring it back in March. So I just wanted to explain that. That's it.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Ms. Purpura?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Purpura. Mr. Reeves?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a reminder of our 5:30 meeting next Monday for Parks and Recreation. It shouldn't be more than a half hour because we are dedicating an hour later for Ms. Pauloff and Mr. Wolenczak's. They'll explain what theirs is about. We're going to talk about the press box and getting an update on all the stuff that's happening at the rec. And then I think there's an add-on that's coming on here, according to Mr. Borton, that he's going to present as well. So that will be on next Monday at 5:30 to 6. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mrs. Pauloff?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff. Mr. Wolenczak?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just as Mr. Reeves was mentioning, there will be a Safety and Finance Committee meeting next Monday at 6 PM to discuss the potential funding of our police and fire or safety services through a potential levy. So that will be discussed at 6 PM, probably here in the council chambers, I'm guessing. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Wolenczak. Mrs. Ackerman?
I have a question about the tree commission. I haven't heard anything about when we will be having meetings or if the mayor plans on making any appointments to that. I believe Mr. Zale on that. I know there was a council person that was supposed to be a part of it, but I just am hoping that we can set up meetings and maybe somebody can help me with how to go about that because we have a lot to do.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Ackerman. Let's ask our question. Do we have a tree commission with a designee from council?
Well,
We don't even have a tree commission.
Well, I know, Keith Henniger's been having meetings, but I think in years past, you did have a representative from council, I thought. So we can review it and go through it. And I know Zale, if there wasn't a requirement, I know he had some interest. And I know prior to that was Mike Sheehy for a lot of years. That was his time. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I do.
Mayor. Go ahead.
At the current time, well, for quite some time, the only person that was active as our tree consultant was Paul Ackerman. And we let him has the latitude of running the tree commission or the decisions made because it was kind of being bogged down when we had a tree commission. And so with Paul's taking charge of that, and Keith Henninger would work with him, they went in, we used Paul as just the consultant because it seemed to work better for him because he was kind of frustrated how it was working prior to that. So I'm certainly willing to make appointments, but at this time, he was really the only active person other than Keith Henninger that was on right now.
Go ahead, Mr. Roman.
And just to echo what the mayor is saying, usually the superintendent of streets was heavily involved. Marty Wineland was as well for a lot of years, and then it was Keith. I think it's just a matter of revisiting what we used to do, and I think it'd be good to return it to what it was. I know Don Charlton, there were some residents who had also volunteered to be on it, and a lot of them have retired and moved on to other things. So yeah, I think it's worth revisiting all of it, and I think there probably should be a council representative. But again, it's up to you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Question following up on that. Council, is there any objection or any concern with looking at, I'll say, reformulating or officially formulating the tree commission if it has kind of disbanded? Any issues or concerns with that? I think it probably would be a positive for the community.
Mr. President, I attended several meetings last year, and I know Paul Drake, I believe that's where I met you. And I know, there were citizens that showed up. I know Paul Ackerman is in Florida part of the year now, and I know he will remain active, but I just I was told that there should be one council representative on there, and I would be happy to serve in that capacity, but I believe it's Mr. Henninger, and he calls the meeting, sets the schedule. Is that
correct?
okay? Thank you.
Okay. So let's pursue that or continue that discussion. Mr. Rum, go ahead.
Well, and I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to give it anyways. My opinion with the public right of way, there's been a lot of years where Marty Wineland would place these trees in the right of way and it'd basically be assigning it to their early death. Trees that would either interfere with the underground utilities or areas where there were no sanitary sewers, and then petition 5 years later, and then we're taking trees out. So I think through the years, it became almost foolish to plant some of these trees in a city that's still growing. I just felt like, the trees should be on private lands and give them a long life rather than putting them in the right of way. So I've always had an issue in planting trees in the right of way. So that's it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Roman. Anything further, Mrs. Ackerman?
I know Mr. Drake or Councilman Drake and I have discussed that there are a lot of cities that are making trees available to homeowners to put, like you said, not in the right of way, because I know I personally, know of several areas where trees have been planted and the salt from the roads, it's, they're below grade and they die every time they plant them, they die. So it's like beating your head against the wall. But I know Councilman Drake and I talked about, that we'd like to see the city move toward having homeowners take ownership, and then they will actually will water and commit to caring for those shade trees. So we hope to increase the tree canopy and our tree inventory. And I worked with the city of Toledo when they did their tree inventory, and I'd like to see Oregon do that. If Toledo can do it, I think we can do it. So, I think there's a lot we can do, and especially sending people to the
Arbor Day.
The Arbor, events.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Ackerman. Mr. Salander.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Salander. Mr. Drake?
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. I have no report. The only thing I want to echo what Beth said. I don't know how many years the city's been with Tree City USA. I know they always send a superintendent or a crew leader and a few maintenance people and go, and it used to bother me because I know we would cut trees down. I know not everybody likes trees, but some people like them. So I think people should have an option. I know there's a lady in East Hampton. We cut her tree down. She wasn't happy. And she wondered if she could get a tree planted back to replace it. And I don't know what she ever heard of it, but like I said, I'm sure the new town center, when that's built, I'm sure they'll have trees and stuff growing in there. Neighborhood shouldn't be any different, but I agree. The city needs to do something with the landscape to make it look better. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Drake. And the only comment I had from my committee is just specific to some of what Mr. Reeves had said before and what, our citizen had come in to talk about. The Economic Development Committee will be moving on meetings over the next 6 to 8 weeks on several different topics. One of which being, the discussion and advancement of the strategic plan for the city, should we choose to do so. Another one will be, we do want to do some follow-up conversation on the Airbnb questions and comments that were brought to us and have a little further dialogue there, as well as the potential residential and commercial code for the city as far as a property maintenance code. So we will be active over the next couple of months, and we'll set those dates accordingly. We've got some other items ahead of time that are, I will say, more pressing immediately because of timelines due to finance and our safety committees. So we'll kind of yield to that timeframe, but we'll start having those sometime over the next 60 days. That said, just a reminder, next week we do have 3 public hearings for agricultural districts to be considered. I will be gone next Monday, unfortunately for a business trip that was scheduled well before this year. So I will not be here next week. Outside of that, I will seek a motion for adjournment.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Salander. Counselor, any objections? Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.